Death Battle's 2025 output is often held up there with seasons 10, 9, and 6 as the best of the series. The scale got bigger, the budget got tighter, and the writing got rightier. Do I hold it the same esteem as some people? To a degree I do, yeah. In terms of quality, I think this batch of 12 episodes has a single bad one, and the other 11 are all at least fairly solid. I don't personally hold as strong a connection to this season as some do. I just think by this point my love for the show, while still strong, isn't as dominant over my soul as it used to be. I have to just accept that the peaks of season 2 when this show was my entire personality have long since passed, and I'll likely never have that particular attachment again. I have a different kind of attachment to one episode though, which for hopefully the last time I'll explain the absence of in one of these videos. Hulk vs. Godzilla, the episode I have not reacted to nor have I reviewed fully, and the reason for that, if you didn't know, is that I actually worked on this episode as a guest researcher. And I want to be clear on that, because I have heard some people, and by heard I mean read in the comments, make the wild claim that I was the lead researcher for this one, or that I spearheaded the research. No, I was a guest researcher, that's literally what it says. I was not the guy at the proverbial dinner table presenting Benjamin B. Singer himself, the platter upon which the scrumptious Godzilla and Hulk research was delivered, alongside like the Smith & Wesson that I assume Americans use as cutlery. I was just a guy who was in the room, but I had a lot of fun, and it was a great time. I'm very happy I got to be there in any capacity, but for that reason I don't think I can fairly rank it. There's always going to be a strong personal bias regardless of the actual quality of the episode, or my problems with the fight and presentation, which I do have, but it's hard for me to, talk about it. I also don't know how much I can say. I don't want to risk pulling back a curtain that's not mine to touch. So in this video, I will only be ranking 11 episodes. That one just has to take a back seat and stay in its fucking lane. How about we not waste any time? I think we ought to rank every episode now. Remember, this is just my opinion, and that's the obligatory disclaimer all YouTubers have to make, because people are prone to taking things as fact and parroting these opinions. Make your own. This is the fire! I want to get out of the way now that in no way do I want to shit on Devil Artemis or his work. I have many issues with the finished product, but I'm not alien to how much work clearly went into it. I just strongly hold that this animation is bad. The writing is also bad. That's not on Devil Artemis as much, but the point stands that overall this is not a shit on Devil Artemis hour. Hopefully again, last time I'll have to bring that up, though I've only brought it up one before, people have been really shitty towards Devil Artemis, and I don't know him as a person. I just want to make that clear. No disrespect meant to Devil Artemis. It's just kind of a shit on Kratos vs. Azra hour, but disconnected from that, because I don't like this episode at all. I think that this episode failed on fundamental principles of 3D animation, and the guy who I talked with a lot and who validated a lot of my problems and helped me put them in words in my review, he's worked on another episode of Death Battle in 3D animation now. So if you want to say I don't know what I'm talking about, or shouldn't talk if I can't do better, well, I know someone who can do better and does know better, and he gave me a thumbs up, so butt out, bonehead, unless you want to tell me that Ash vs. Yugi is animated by people who don't know what they're doing. But beyond the fight though, I want to talk about the analysis. Kratos' analysis I have soured on even more, especially having replayed that original God of War trilogy since watching the episode. It has gone from analysis I thought was a bit underwhelming to, honestly, I think being a really bad one that doesn't sell the character or flow super well. There is a point people like to make that I'll bring up a few times in this video along the lines of, why does it matter whether or not the analysis is in depth? It's just a versus analysis, and I think I should clear up once more. My stance is that it matters as far as it is applicable. I guess more so, I want an analysis for a character I like to be able to comfortably sell that character. The analysis isn't just there so you know what powers are being used in the fight and can guess who is going to win. It is a way for the people working on the show to represent their passion and understanding of the character in question, to help the viewer understand who the character is and why they're cool. Because funnily enough, why they're cool and how strong they are and what they can do aren't the same thing. I think about Shigaragi's analysis from his episode and how that sold me on the character when I didn't care about him. I want at some point now to kind of go back and finish reading My Hero Academia just because I was compelled by how they described him. And I think about times a character I really like has gotten a really good analysis, like Bill Cipher and Discord. And I think not only am I satisfied with how they were covered, but it makes me happy to see that there were a lot of people who didn't care about one or the other, or even both, who came around to liking them just from the quality of the analysis. That makes me happy as a fan of the characters, and I think every character deserves that, even if I may not like that character. Someone like Mario doesn't need an analysis that goes into any deep character, because that's not Mario. That's not how you sell Mario. Just look at Saitama vs. Popeye for a great example. Saitama's analysis is a good coverage of a complicated character. Popeye's is just an entertaining look at a zany and simplistic character. They needed different things to sell them, and they got different things. And you can tell that the writers of Death Battle don't just want to tell you how strong they are. They do want to sell you on the character. And you can see that in some of the best episodes. In some classic episodes. You can see that in fucking First Thought after Shigaraki, Reverse Flash. Fantastic analysis. Really sells you on the character. And you know, I write versus analyses on my own versus show. And I wrote one for Dr. Manhattan. And you know what? I put a lot of fucking time and passion into that. And a lot of people who liked Manhattan really liked it. And a lot of people who didn't know Manhattan came to like him from that. And that makes me happy because it means I did my damn job well. I'm not saying I'm better at it than Death Battle. Not even remotely. Not even close. Don't even think that. I will eat your earlobes. I'm just saying, from personal experience and from knowing some of the people who work on the show, I know that they don't just want to throw out something that fails to sell the character. And in that regard, what the hell were they smoking with Kratos' analysis? Now I understand, Kratos is a tough character to cover. He's got no less than 8 games of major importance, maybe more if I forgot one, between the original trilogy, the Norse duology, the PSP games, and whatever Ascension is supposed to be. I'd argue there's about 10 key points you want to hit for Kratos, some of which can go on longer than others and some of which don't have to. 1, he gives his life to become a warrior for his people. 2, he's tricked by Ares into killing his wife and child and he becomes a monster in the eyes of everyone. 3, he follows the will of the gods of Olympus for years, seeking to be freed from his memories. He is placed in a situation though where he can finally get his revenge as a result. 4, Kratos opens Pandora's box, kills Ares, takes his place as the god of war, but never is freed from his torturous memories. 5, Kratos learns of his brother who was taken from his family at a young age and seeks to free him, only to learn the god's actions have led to the death of the only family he has left. As a result, he loses any respect for them and becomes a poor god of war. 6, after betraying Zeus, Kratos wages a war on Olympus and in doing so slaughters the Olympians one by one. However, 7, he learns that in opening Pandora's box he doomed the world regardless, and he has the whole time been nothing more than a pawn in the schemes of the divine. He returns hope to the world of Greece, but he leaves in shame as to his actions. 8, after travelling many realms, he arrives in Norway, finds a new life, a new wife, and a new son he will not let die like his daughter, until after living this life for years, his wife passes away. 9, Kratos goes on a journey with his new son Atreus, learning to be a father again, but being forced to bring about Ragnarok and the end of this new world that has become his new home. And finally 10, facing this confrontation head on, he minimized the calamity of this apocalypse and came to accept himself as a monster no longer who could rise up to be a better god than those before him. That might seem like a lot, but you can really condense this down. The first entire 5 can just be a couple sentences, not even any more in depth than I gave. Those are the setup for the main story of God of War as a franchise. Then you can focus on his power set after talking about how he became a poor god of war, and then you can go from that into Kratos fighting the Olympians, and then the reveal of Pandora's box, and then how that led to Norway, and then all his powers and weapons from there, and then the story of that after. I don't really think it's actually that hard, and my issue isn't that Death Battle didn't hit all of them, it's that Death Battle barely hit any of them at all. They blaze through the whole Greek saga in no time. And not only that, but they play into that awful dude bro awesome guy interpretation of God of War 3 that fans have misunderstood for years. Kratos slaughtering Olympus wasn't a badass awesome thing. I mean, to a degree it kinda was, but in universe it was a horrific act that ended his entire nation. Hope is barely mentioned as if it isn't the main theme of the climax of the first entire half of his story, and it just feels weird if you don't know what they mean by releasing hope. They're also terrible at selling Kratos as badass. They go, "Well, Thor wishes Mjolnir was as cool as the Leviathan axe," and then they list the Leviathan axe as being elemental as if Mjolnir isn't, poisonous, which to be fair is something that Mjolnir isn't, and being able to return to Kratos' hand. Yeah, I bet Thor sure wishes Mjolnir could return to his hand at will. Oh, and shattering souls. A feat that was accomplished when Mjolnir hit it really hard, back and forth. And then despite this, they used the Thor Ragnarok meme, but in a way that implies Kratos couldn't actually defeat Thor, and he needed Surtur to do it? I mean, that one's a small thing, admittedly. That's just a little offhand joke. But again, they just suck at hyping Kratos up as a badass. The analysis doesn't at all show a love or understanding of the character. It's a surface level at best look at Kratos that tries really fast to skip to the Norse stuff, but doesn't set up the stuff that makes the Norse story fulfilling. Would you believe it is something I'm terrified about with the upcoming live-action God of War. Don't start the story at the Norse saga, you idiots. You don't start the MCU at Civil War. Comparatively, Azura's analysis, I'm not an authority to speak on. I have not got enough knowledge on Azura's route to say whether it's good or not, though I did purchase a copy. It did sell me on Azura though. I liked the character they described, and I did feel like he was a fully fleshed out and developed one. They play up his rage and his wrath so much, and because of that, there's a genuine satisfaction and almost emotional feeling when they talk about how that rage the whole time was actually a shield for those who needed it, not a sword made for hate. It changes how you look at their descriptions of how cool he is, because you begin to see how everything they bring up was him destroying those who had tried to harm others. It's not about destroying what you hate, but saving what you love. I won't talk as long on Azura because I don't know him, but the analysis did sell me on him. And then comes the fight, where Azura is portrayed differently. In the analysis, Azura is described as someone in control of his rage, a capable, rational thinker and not a slave to his anger. In the fight, Kratos imagines Azura coming to his door and then magically gets teleported somewhere else. 3 guys attack him and Azura runs in, because within the solid 20 seconds Kratos has been around, somehow the rumor mill is already spun. Azura sees Kratos surrounded by some guys who also immediately disappear in the same room as his daughter, who is completely calm and not even remotely bothered. Then, like a slave to anger, he immediately assumes the worst and attacks Kratos based on his reputation. Mind you, a lot of people point to their reputation as to why he attacked. Those people have never played a God of War game, because if you played the Norse games, you'd know that the reputation Kratos has as the Ghost of Sparta is the guy who killed a bunch of asshole gods who deserved it. The Aesir and Mimir are not ignorant to the Olympian gods and what they did. The only way this makes sense is if Kratos had not killed Olympus yet, and Ghost of Sparta was known as the guy who killed his family. That obviously visually isn't possible. If Azura heard the same information, he should have enough information to assess the situation. So I think him saying Ghost of Sparta as if he knows who he is makes the scene worse, because in the world of God of War, the Ghost of Sparta is known far and wide amongst the gods as the guy who killed a bunch of assholes who were asking for it. So it just makes Azura seem like a slave to his hate, and he attacks Kratos, who also doesn't try to clear up the situation, which, again, if you play the Norse games, it's a little bit out of character for Kratos to just not even try to talk it out. The guy who goes out of his way to avoid fighting as much as possible because he's afraid of the monster within, just accepts the battle. Let's not pretend like Azura is the only one at fault here, I have to admit. And the key issue with the difference in portrayal here is probably where Kratos outright says, "Wrath consumes you," or whatever, and Azura tells him to shut up. Did they not say already that Azura has control over his anger? Do they not go on to say that he is more experienced in controlling his anger in the conclusion? Azura is a wild monster of hatred in this fight, a blind fool who refuses to look at the situation in any way other than the one that makes him angry. He's frankly a crybaby, and the thing is, I'm no authority on whether or not this is accurate. All I can say is that I would like some consistency between the analysis and the fight. Azura in the analysis did not come off as the kind of guy who would immediately assume the worst, attack Kratos, and potentially if he hit Kratos too hard, make him fly back and break Mithra in half, putting her in danger without taking a moment to try and get her out of the radius of his high impact punch. Or the kind of guy who would start a fight, and then when he starts losing and his daughter is understandably distraught, blame Kratos for not folding. This is your doing, you started the fight, you jobbed, you made Mithra cry, grow up. Oh, and don't get me started on the jobbing. Azura sucks in this fight. He does okay in base form, 6-arm Vajra lands a single combo that does nothing and gets throttled, Mantra Azura shows up, throws one attack, gets blown to bits, Wrath and Berserker Azura both appear back to back, wherein one of them one-shots itself into the other form while not harming Kratos, and the other just gets limply tossed. The Destructor then shows up in what I will admit is a sick as hell moment. Fucking awesome, great attack, immediately no-sold, countered, and then gets pelted with attacks and stabbed to death. Azura's forms progressively get worse, and a lot of that comes from how Kratos feels so in control. He takes no battle damage, which I can kind of accept because it's not easy to always put damage on a 3D model like this, but he also doesn't have any particularly painful sounding battle foley. There's no when he gets hit to make it seem like he's really feeling pain. He's not struggling. The ending also tries to tug on the heartstrings, but like, no. Azura acts like a mindless beast all fight and has the goal to say, "I never was," when called a monster. Bitch, you acted like a monster. Don't you try and act as if you didn't deserve this. And why does Kratos even say this? What prompted this? He sees Azura get mad and goes, ah yes, he must be suffering like I did. He certainly doesn't do that with Thor or Boulder. If you played those games, you would know it takes some time before he learns enough about them to understand what they do. And shockingly, he tries to talk to them before resorting to the kill. And I'm not saying that the episode needs to be as in-depth as those games. I'm just saying that people bring up things from those games to try and defend the episode, but I don't think they understand what's happening in those games. And all this is wrapped up in bad animation, or should I say, bad camera work. A lot of shots swing the camera around wildly, failing to convey the impact and focus of any given scene, and I'd be shocked if anyone argued this particular point, because you'd have to argue against a very skilled 3D animator who validated my thoughts. Appeal to authority fallacy, I'm using it. Animations lack impact, there's no momentum at times like this rock swing, or no follow through for this big punch. Characters will throw out weapons and attacks for no reason. I don't even know why. The storyboard is so good at conveying why the characters are using each weapon and power. It's like things were changed when going into the animation without understanding why they were written as they were. It feels like there was a lack of communication there. I do genuinely think it's a bad episode. The animation fails at rudimentary basic levels, the writing is terrible and inconsistent, and the characters are poorly done in the fight. Kratos would never do this dumb smile, but I wouldn't even be bothered by this dumb smile if he wasn't so out of character the whole time doing shit. Oh, death has not earned me yet, but you deserve a worthy end. What the fuck kind of line is that for Norse Kratos to be shouting? I don't like this one. As a big fan of Kratos, it did nothing for me. And I feel bad for fans of Azura who would have wanted to see him do something in the fight. But no, I'm okay if you like it, that's fine. Of course, you're allowed to, and that's okay. But I personally have never and probably won't ever be one of Kratos vs. Azura's fans.
It's Doom time!
Right, you remember when I said it was important to sell the characters? This episode tries to sell the functions. I will say, Master Chief vs. Doomslayer is a marked step up from Kratos vs. Azura overall. I'd call it an okay episode, in fact. But as a fan of Halo and Doom, there's an itch it didn't scratch. This isn't an analysis that wants to sell the characters to an audience. It's an analysis that wants to try to convince you that you like them already. Say it with me, and you all know you do X stuff is peppered throughout. But you know what isn't? Anything to do with the characters. At bare minimum, an outsider can get from Kratos' analysis that he has a redemption arc of sorts and he was depressed. Master Chief's actual personality or character is not present in this episode. Would anyone unfamiliar with him understand that he's a guy who suffers from intense survivor's guilt and struggles with the fact that he's the lucky one that walks out of every fight? Someone so loyal and strongly devoted to the few allies that survive that he spent whole games just trying to save Cortana because he can't handle losing anyone else. You wouldn't get that at all. Cortana's barely acknowledged as a character, and the way they just go, well, he got a new one, is by far the second worst way the season explained the conclusion to a character's arc. And I think if they can explain so well Soul's connection to Maka, surely they could have done so with Cortana and Chief, right? Nah, they couldn't, I guess. Doomslayer maybe has it worse, because I have seen at least some people understand Chief as a character outside of this context. Flynn has maybe the worst situation this season. He is literally just boiled down to the rip and tear kill guy. Nowhere do you see acknowledgement that he's actually a character, someone consumed by hatred and rage that all he has left is killing demons, who thought he found some degree of a goal with the Makers, only for all that to be bullshit. Someone who is a genuine hero who protects mankind to the end, but is himself unprotected as a human. a weapon to be used by others because all he has left to give the world and all he has left to give any meaning to his immortal existence is killing demons. But this analysis, if anything, mocks the very notion that Doom could have a deeper story. Which, why would you do that? And again, I don't need an intense, in-depth character study. I don't need the episode to try and tug on my emotional heartstrings. I just want to see the characters represent. I want to see the people behind this show make me aware that, oh yeah, they understand these characters. They know why they're cool. Doomslayer isn't just cool because he rips and tears. About a million other there is a franchise called Warhammer 40k where there are thousands of characters who just do that. What makes Doomslayer special? To me, it's the fact that that's kind of the point. That he is just that guy now, and that's not a good thing. No. Fuck me for being a fan of Doom and Halo, I guess. I will say though, I think the fight is definitely an improvement from the first 3D episode of the season. It isn't what I wanted, I'll admit. This is only somewhat on the episode, but it's mostly on me, because I just kind of wanted something else, so I can't hold too much against Death Battle for not sharing my vision. That's the point where it's like, okay, that's a skill issue. I just really wanted a gunfight. Like a classic two guys with guns shooting it out battle. And what I got was a pretty standard melee brawl with a couple guns. It starts with guns, there is a plasma gun, there is a rocket launcher, later there's some SMGs that do nothing, they shoot big laser cannon. Making 2 out of 2 episodes where Doomguy's ultimate weapon got cancelled out and accomplished nothing was a choice. But you see, I was hoping for something like Ratchet & Clank vs. Jak and Daxter, or Master Chief vs. Doomguy, a fight about shooting guns at a distance, which would make sense, that's the whole point of the matchup. But that's what we got. It feels a bit disjointed, if that's maybe that's just me. Part 1 and 2 are not made with each other in mind, it feels. Part 1 goes out of its way to be game accurate. Master Chief has to pick up and discard weapons for the most part and only has about 2 at a time. Doomslayer doesn't have this limitation, and it's one of the few things done to creatively emphasize the differences. I really like that Chief is immediately overpowered in melee, and creatively fires the brute shot in a way to get an advantage. He uses a vehicle to distract Doomslayer to hit him with a big weapon, knowing that he could probably avoid it otherwise. In their second melee clash, he knows that Doomslayer is a more one-note type of fighter, so he purposely pulls back so that Doomslayer can send himself off balance. I adore this first-person bit and how smoothly it transitions back to normal. Mwah, beautiful. And aside from the couple janky motions and this really weirdly animated headbutt that feels a bit too slow and lethargic for an attack guy like Flynn, I feel most of it genuinely feels like the characters. Yeah, how the fight starts is very dumb, but hey, it was pretty good. This segment's pretty good. But in the second half, I just don't feel like it's that. It doesn't bother for game accuracy, which I would be fine with if the first half didn't try to do that. Like, either do the game accurate 2 weapons at a time, Master Chief, or don't. Don't give me this half and half shit. It immediately goes into a really lame demon killing moment. I know people love this bit, but I don't. Compared to the similar Leon vs. Frank moment, and notice the big difference is that episode actually shows both characters at once, while this one barely shows the other when one is doing their thing. I want to see Doomslayer vs. Master Chief, not this pointless stuff that's not really well animated or choreographed enough to be interesting. Like, I know some people are like, dude, just relax and enjoy it, it's cool, but is it? It's Doomslayer killing some demons, like, that's not what he always does, and Chief doing that too. If I want to see that, I'll play Doom Eternal, honestly. Cortana calls Vega annoying as if he's done literally anything all fight. Chief tries to shoot Doomslayer in the head despite already failing with that prior while using a stronger gun, and any sense of the strong versus skill dynamic isn't felt. Chief easily blocks a melee attack from the Slayer, for instance. You see what I mean by how, like, this doesn't feel connected to the first half? This, like, on its own, Chief sneaking up on Slayer, shooting him in the head while invisible, or trying to, makes sense. Cortana being annoyed by Vega and trying to get rid of him, makes sense. Chief blocking a melee attack from the Slayer? Artistic license I can accept. But that only works if that's the whole thing with the fight. But when you have that first half where Vega does nothing, a pistol does nothing, and Slayer is portrayed as way stronger, it now feels a bit disjointed. And Slayer running to grab the rocket after he misses, it's a cool shot. I can even forgive the rocket going from being a diagonally upwards shot to the next shot being horizontal and thus being really confusing spatially. But this isn't Doomslayer. I know that with a glitch he can do this where he runs faster than the missiles, but seeing him do it like this, it just doesn't feel like him. You know, it's like how Batman can survive a nuclear bomb in the face in the comics, but it'd be really weird to see him just do that in a movie, just stand in the middle of a nuke and walk it off. Chief hits a pointless pose, pulling out what's essentially another pair of pistols, as if that worked the first 2 times, and then Cortana does nothing or fight Lila style, and the death sucks. I'm not going to say it's out of character for being brutal, the issue's a bit more nuanced than that. The out of character part is Doomslayer continuing the fight at all after Chief helped him. This is only a problem because they added the random team up. In character, after this team up, Slayer would probably turn around and stare Chief down to try and ascertain, are you really on my side? Or is this just an enemy of my enemy is still my enemy situation? But, you know, people don't recognize the Slayer as a character, not helped by this analysis, so they brush off the complaint. I mean, I guess it's my fault for liking Doom. No, my other issue is that this is not what a glory kill is. It's really easy to miss Slayer cutting off the arms, and it's kind of elaborate, but not brutal. Like, he just kind of cuts some arms off, stabs Chief, explodes his head off, and takes so long that it doesn't feel like a glory kill. Those are efficient, brutal methods of killing a foe. This is decidedly inefficient and stupid and not even gory enough to be cool. He even breaks Chief's neck to kill him before stabbing him with the crucible, wasting its last charge for no reason. I would have been totally okay if, say, he used the crucible early on one swing that destroys the energy sword immediately, then later he uses it to, like, slice through the Spartan laser, completely nullifying that, and then he uses the last swing to kill Chief. That would have been fucking cool, actually. But here, it just kind of feels dumb and unaware of anything about what Doom is. Like the rest of the episode, that feels like it doesn't really care about Doom as a franchise, but just like the hype of Doom as like a social thing. It's dumb. But as said, like that first half of the fight, I genuinely think is actually great. It's very well choreographed. I think it gets the dynamic of the characters down perfectly. I love the fights when they can show the stat gap in a way that feels right. Like, Slayer is stronger than Chief, sure, but it's not just because feats and stuff. It just feels right for Slayer to be stronger. He just feels like a character who's portrayed as stronger, while Chief feels like a character that is portrayed more agile and creative and skilled. And so, like, I kind of dig this dynamic. I wanted more of this stuff that Chief does at the start, using his weapons in unique ways to get around the fucking monster he's fighting. As it is, the second half makes Chief kind of just look like a loser who can't do anything, which it is accurate to the result for Chief to do nothing or fight, but that doesn't make for a very interesting watch. When it's the Doomslayer show, but with no Doomslayer on display. Also, that delivery for Rip and Tear was kind of arse. For me, this episode is Master Chief jobs to a physical embodiment of the hyper Doomslayer that's not actually Doomslayer.
Gracias!
Alright, okay, so Spider-Man vs. Izuku Midoriya. So, this one will be maybe the longest segment of the video, because I am happy with my reviews, except for this one. This is the episode where I think my review kinda sucks. I think it's clear that I was sick when I did that, and while I thought it wouldn't affect my output, I was just fucking wrong. It's clear that some people misinterpreted my points, and some points just weren't very clear. I want to fix that, you know, so yeah, not to say that that review is I'm not going to entirely blame the sickness for that review being bad. Sometimes I just fuck up. Spider-Man vs. Deku is not a bad episode. It's not an episode I dislike. I think it's fine. It has some major things that I think are really good, and some things I dislike. Let's get those downsides out of the way, because I did focus on them more than the positives in my review, and I think that was a mistake. So let's just get what I don't like out of the way. Not a fan of the choreography or the floatiness of the fight. Some stuff looks really weightless. Motions across the board have so many frames they can come off looking really smooth, but they don't convey speed. If anyone has seen like the example of two balls moving the same distance in 8 frames but animated 2 different ways, that's kind of what's... I'm not sure that's what's going on, but like, you'll have some idea what I'm saying. Obviously not every blow does this, but some like Deku's kick on this building doesn't feel fast. There's a very slow acceleration after he kicks it, which makes his kick feel very lacking in impact, or like Miles spinning in the air can look weird sometimes. And this is not a nitpick, to be clear. I don't want people to think that this is a nitpick that only applies to those specific scenes. I'm not saying this kick bad, ergo episode bad. These are two examples of a problem throughout the fight. I also am not a fan of all the references made by Miles. The Deku one being mocked as a reference was a joke in my review, but I didn't sell that at all. Fuck ass line delivery, me. The Nomu reference is fine, but looking at Miles' lines, his first line about Deku being more man than Spider, fun, I like that. It's maybe a little weird because he assumes Deku, like, isn't a Spider-Man at all, given how diverse they are. But one of the key connecting factors is a mask, and Deku is not wearing his. That's fine, I think. Something I didn't pick up is that the second line might be mistimed. He points to his mouth like 2 seconds after he's done saying don't watch the mouth. To be clear, this isn't a big deal, but I'm curious as to if he was supposed to say like first lesson while pointing at Deku, and then don't watch the mouth while pointing at this mouth. Let me try to see if I can retime this.
Alright, new guy. First lesson, don't watch the mouth. Watch the hands.
Yeah, I haven't seen it because I'm recording, but maybe that works better. Anyway, yeah, this is a Spider-Verse reference. It's a pretty ham-fisted one in my opinion. My bigger issue is that I don't know if this is something Miles in the comics would do. This is ostensibly supposed to be comic Miles, and this feels like something very specific to Spider-Verse. Feel free to let me know, both of you people who read Miles comics. Spider-Verse very well could have taken it from the comic. I do genuinely like how this attack doesn't work. Like, Deku didn't really need the lesson because Danger Sense alerted him of Miles' attack. That's cool, I like that. Also, apparently, in Hero Academia, Deku does drop the X smash lines after getting more quirks. Oddly, I saw only one person bring this up in the comments of my review. I would have thought the Hero Acca fans would have wanted to tell me this more, but if that's the case, that's a shame. Like, I would have liked an interaction along the lines of, I don't know, Delaware? Texas? Hey man, you got a Brooklyn smash? Well, Brooklyn isn't a state. Yeah, but you have a Detroit smash, so I'm just saying. I don't know if that's in character for Miles to act like that. Again, please let me know. I would like to be aware if my suggestions make any sense or not for the characters' personalities, but I don't know, I just think that'd be funny. Miles then says, let's try that one more time. The reference again, second one. It's natural enough, but I'm not sure it's more natural than just going, yeah, let's try that again. Not a big one. It only really bothers me when I first watched it because Boomstick also brings that up in the my throat. In the analysis, he doesn't bring it up in my throat. Guess who is a generic line, but it makes sense and I'm not bothered. I'm actually glad he said this in reference to how he lost Deku for a second, instead of like parroting what Peter said in season 1 of Death Battle. I do like referencing the season 1 Spider-Man kick, and I don't think loser would be a very Miles thing to say anyway. I don't recall Miles saying anything like, you got skills, man, I like that. And I will be fair, I forgot he said this in the review, like I forgot that's a line. Good line! Even if it turns out to be a reference, I like the respect shown here. Oh, mierda sounds fine, but it does sound like he pronounces it differently to how I hear any of my Spanish-speaking friends say it. Not an authority on that, I don't speak Spanish, there's more than one kind of Spanish. It just sounds different to how friends I know say it. Then there's, if I'm gonna do my best, I gotta do my own thing, which I don't understand. He's been doing his own thing all fight. He opened with invisibility, he used his electro webbing just a moment ago. The only way I can interpret this is him going, I have to use my venom powers more. And the difficulty here is that frankly, this is at this point an overplayed line that the internet is milk dry. Doesn't really fit the context of what's going on here. Like in the movie, he says it in response to being told what to do by Miguel. Deku didn't tell Miles what to do, he just said he can go all out now without worrying about the city. So Miles isn't using it in the same context as the movie, which is good, I do like when they do that. But I do prefer when a reference line is given a new context. Here the context is, he just told me he can feel free to do his best, and his response is to go, then I'll do my own thing, which implies he wasn't doing his own thing. I don't know. Is this an unnecessary overanalysis of one line of dialogue? Absolutely. Does this overanalysis determine my opinion? No. Was I bothered by the line of dialogue and not really sure what he meant on my first watch before analyzing it? Yes. Is it okay if you weren't? Also yes, again, just my opinion. There were plenty of people who argued against my opinion, saying that they weren't bothered by the references and that they felt like they were naturally used. Acceptable, I have no issue with that, like that's a fair opinion. I can see where people are coming from too, like just liking the references and thought they were good. I can't say I agree with most people who go, well, the iconic Miles thing is Spider-Verse, so that's more important than the comics. Because at that point, if that was the point, Death Battle shouldn't act like this is comic Miles they're using, when they just gave some comic Miles powers to Spider-Verse Miles. And the annoying thing is I can't even give examples of what I want to see, because I've not read enough of Miles comics to know what he's consistently like. All I can say is that I didn't want to see so much Spider-Verse in how he acts. In the same way I don't think it would make sense for Goku to act like his original dub self, just because that's the one that a lot of Death Battle's older fans grew up with and are familiar with. I don't think it would make more sense for Thor to act like a goofy goober because his most iconic version is the MCU. I don't think Raven should just be Teen Titans Raven because that's her most iconic version. I don't think Black Adam should have acted like The Rock just because that's regrettably the only time Black Adam has ever been relevant. This is marketed and portrayed in the analysis as Earth 1610 Miles Morales the Ultimate Spider-Man versus Izuku Midoriya, not Earth 1610B Miles Morales from Spider-Verse. Is it a B at the end because he's like the Peter B. Parker of Miles Morales? Not important. That is where my issue lies. I don't think it's reasonable to argue, well, it's the most popular, so it should take precedent to the point of being the entire basis for the fight's characterization. We're talking about a singular incarnation that is different from that one. Now, it can be fair when talking about, say, Godzilla or the Doctor, where they're being composited or there's many versions of the character that are phased into one. Like, that's different. Oh, and Miles' last line is Leap of Faith in Spanish. How did I know it was Leap of Faith in Spanish? I know a lot of people who speak Spanish, one of them fucking told me. It's another Spider-Verse reference, it doesn't fit to me. It's weird that that's his, like, battle cry. His leap of faith, which immediately costs him everything. Not a huge deal, but these small things build up over time. And yeah, I still don't like the death. I know it's an overhaul reference, but I think it looks dumb. The way in which Miles goes, and then doesn't really go motionless, he's still moving, it just looks like he gives up, is really funny to me. And I stand by Deku not looking like he's touching the web. It looks dumb. Also, I don't like how there's no fast acceleration when the web actually breaks. Like, this is a small thing that as an animator just annoys me. He retains like the same speed after it snaps when there should be like a sudden jolt forward, which anyone would know if they've seen a pressure launched missile on a toy or something. There's tension, the tension breaks, and it should shoot out. The next shot doesn't convey that well, but like, again, this is not a big deal. Like, this is just, if I had animated this, I'd probably be kicking myself over it when someone brings it up. And basically any of my animator friends, including Origin the David, would agree with me there. And I know this because David still can't get over the fucking pen. That said, let's emphasize what I did like now, because I'm fully willing to take the L on the fact that I didn't nearly go into it enough in my review. Obviously, the fight looks stunning. Even in the shots where the movement might be weird, the actual animation quality looks great. I adore the way the two look like they're from different mediums. Normally this might be jarring, like say Beast vs Goliath sprites and how they look so off next to each other, but in the context of what they're going for here, which I will acknowledge is another Spider-Verse thing, is that the characters retain their original aesthetic regardless of what universe they're in, and I think that's fine. That was like a kind of a run-on sentence, hold on. They're taking Spider-Verse inspiration in having the characters look from their natural universes, instead of one or the other shifting to match the look of the other. And because of that, I don't think it's jarring that Miles looks like a 3D animated model and Deku looks like a 2D drawing. It looks really striking, and anytime they're on screen together is a treat. For instance, the really cool Ultimate Spider-Man line that I didn't mention because I already glazed it, though I recognize it's a little bit forced, but it pushes an agenda I agree with, so I might be biased there, is also accompanied with some really cool animation of their fighting, and part of that is how nice the two models look in their contrast to one another. The times where they physically interact, like when Deku grabs Miles, also look really natural. There's also this persistent comic book look with like the Ben-Day dots in multiple points, which really helps sell all the visuals. As I said before, I love the camera work at points. I love this shot of Miles falling and zipping back up. There's so much kinetic motion, and the way the camera follows him as just the background moves. It might seem like a small common thing you see all the time, but in this era of Death Battle, it is not a common way that these shots are done in 3D. A small thing that I actually really like is Deku could have easily shattered Miles' wrist here, but instead he only squeezes hard enough to break the web shooter. It's a small thing that helps get across the friendly nature of most of this fight. Not a big deal, but like a small piece of the puzzle. I do like Deku taking the fight to an area where nobody is in danger, but like, I do gotta ask, why does this area exist? I don't live in New York. Can any New Yorkers in chat let me know if they're big fans of the abandoned shithole district? Now, while I said I'm not a big fan of like the building kick and like, I want to know, was this intended at like some point for Deku versus Asta? Like, this feels like a Deku versus Asta reference. It's too specific not to be, right? Unless like Deku actually does this in the manga. But like, it does make me wonder, in Deku versus Asta, was he supposed to be using a chain to help him throw the building in that episode? But like somewhere early in, there was like a miscommunication, and this bit in Versus Spider-Man is their attempt to reuse the concept in a more accurate way than the fabled levitation for all. The leap of faith shot, I mean, it looks great, of course. Like, it looks beautiful. It's a great, like, reference visually. It's striking. The color usage is great. I love, like, the rubble going upwards towards the cityscape at the top. It makes for a really nice bit of symmetry. I mentioned before, really liking when characters bring up things from their series casually, like, and naturally. It feels like they're in a bigger world, and that applies to the Zero line. I think that's really cool. But Kamehameha's fun. Nothing more than that. They don't show any Weeb Miles examples in the analysis, but the fight picks up the slack here. The Kamehameha and the Chidori feel like comic Miles things that Spider-Verse Miles wouldn't do. I think they're both really cool moments, especially the Chidori, that goes to highlight the kind of character he is. There could have been an argument made that it would be cooler if he matched Deku with like an All Might type smash instead. Maybe this is where the Brooklyn smash could happen. But I don't think that would match as well with like the lightning theming, and it might tread a bit too close to the conceit behind the final clash of Kyle versus Simone. This shot of Deku charging up is fucking baller, by the way. Also, as I have said, I think starting with comics and ending with manga is fun, even if Deku spells Spider-Man wrong, you bastard! What kind of comic nerd are you? Peter can hear that shit! Peter can hear that shit. What does this say about how Spider-Man is pronounced in the comic world? So to be clear, there is a lot I think works in this episode. That's why I think it evens out into being an average, but not bad episode. Also, I did see someone in the comments like interpreting the last scene of like as being Deku in the afterlife who he died after the clash. It's an interesting interpretation if nothing else. I can see what they mean, but it's not something I would have thought of. Now, I have addressed some points made against my original view already, although there's a decent chunk of generally normal stuff that I see all the time, like bro is nitpicking, which, again, it implies that these people think the weight of the animation and characterization of the combatants is somehow an irrelevant element to the quality of the fight, which, if you think that, you're an idiot. Or even that I went in wanting to dislike the episode. I should be clear that I'm not really a fan of Kyle versus Simone as a matchup, for instance. I'm Team Simone versus Ryoma, or I guess Daiguren versus Team Getter. Though in that regard, Getter Robo versus Marzinger all the way, baby. And you'll be seeing how high that episode got in the rankings, so not liking or caring about the matchup does not play a factor here, okay? Like, that's where I look at people criticizing me and go, alright, that's a step too far. I didn't go in wanting to dislike the episode. But let me go over some of the real points made against my review, just quickly and hopefully not dwelling too long. So a lot of people didn't like my thoughts on the analyses, and I think that's fine. They didn't do anything for me, but that doesn't mean people aren't allowed to think otherwise. I'm not into those episodes where the story is just for the start and just for the end. I feel the best way to show an understanding of the characters is to do it throughout the analysis. There were obviously people who disagreed with the Spider-Verse Miles opinion. Again, that's completely fine. Looking at it, only 4 of his lines were direct Spider-Verse references, even if one was in Spanish. He should have been shouting Chingo de Madre instead, I'm gonna be honest. I'm so sorry, Eve and Kitty, for how I have pronounced that. But it's not just those things that are Spider-Verse. Like, it's also like the aesthetic and the vibe. The analysis begins with a reference to that. It focuses on a character arc that is the same as in Spider-Verse. The leap of faith shot is used. There's a lot more to how it directly references Spider-Verse than just the lines Miles uses. I shouldn't have to say this as well. The only thing not Spider-Verse is the power set Miles has. Power set isn't character. I wanted to see the comic character, get to know him. And I do understand some people don't mind. And again, that's fine. Like, there are definitely times where I also don't mind this sort of thing. And like, it's just kind of like a, sometimes it works for me, sometimes it doesn't thing, you know? And this is actually a point where there were very few people making bad faith arguments. Most people were actually arguing this point respectfully, and I actually really appreciate that. So like, genuinely, thank you to everyone who argued against my Spider-Verse point, but like, in a respectful way, which was the vast majority of people in my comment section. And I don't think I can express enough that it sucks to be ragged on, but I really appreciated seeing the way the community that I have cultivated went about it. Like, I really appreciated that. even though none of you probably did it for my sake. Some people, I think, misunderstood my Blake Mikasa point. I wasn't saying the episode was at that level of quality. Spider-Man vs. Izuku Midoriya shits on Blake vs. Mikasa. It's not even close. The only point I give that episode is that it has a funnier death. I'd hardly call that a point in its favor. But it is the best example I could think of an episode where one character is like the protagonist, whose thoughts are conveyed to the audience to show their strategy, while the other is just there. From what I've seen of Attack on Titan and Hero Academia, it's more reasonable for this one. Deku's inner thoughts are very well laid out in this series, so I get the intent there, and you could arguably apply this to Deku vs. Asta too. I did see someone suggest this for Goro vs. Majima as a better comparison. I haven't watched Jujutsu Kaisen or Chainsaw Man though, so I can't comment. Anyone more familiar, do let me know if that's a fair comparison. I think I could have articulated the point better. I unintentionally came off as if I was pulling this episode down to that one's level. No, not even close. Even if this episode was as bad equally as that one in this aspect, it'd still be so much better than Blake vs. Mikasa. Minor thing anyway, I don't think it's a point that should have been so heavily focused on in the comments or in the video. One thing I noticed was a few people wanting more clarification on what I don't like about the shot of Miles running through the building. Good question. I also feel like people are going to take this and go, look, he's slowing down the footage to prove he dislikes it. But hey, I've mentioned the straw man, so people aren't going to be the straw man anymore, right? Miles spinning through the building is fine, but like when he runs, it doesn't line up with the ground he's on. He runs as if he's on a flat surface when there's a big hole he should have stepped into. He doesn't have any animation preparing to dodge in the next two dodges. His body just moves, which is kind of fine with the first dodge because all he's doing is moving one leg backwards. But he does a backflip that launches him really far to the right, which doesn't look correct. Like, there's no preparation for making that motion, which you need to do a backflip. He swings back on screen and is launched to the left, which slowed down doesn't look too bad, but at normal speed, it looks like he kind of gains a lot of extra velocity when he shouldn't. I will concede that any of these are small issues on their own, and you have to slow the footage down to notice the details, and I don't blame anyone if none of those bothered them because of how quick it is. But for me, it looked wrong and weightless, and I did not know why until I slowed down to analyze what was happening. I didn't slow it down and then look at it and then decide that's why I don't like it. I thought it looked weird, slowed it down, and figured out why I thought it looked weird. And I guess to finish this off, I saw people bring up that I was very positive on Miles vs. Static, despite that having similar issues, and, I mean, ever consider maybe my opinion might change with time? I don't mind the references as much in Miles vs. Static, but looking back, they feel forced as well. The stop sticking line is about as forced as any line in this episode, maybe more, where like it makes sense in context, but it's just like so blatant, and the shoulder touch, while a fun moment of character, does weirdly pause the fight. It shows off Miles' superior physical strength with how he wins Static with one hit, and his character and decides to do something silly because he's a huge dork, but it is more jarring and pace-breaking than any reference in Miles vs. Izuku. Kind of a personal preference thing, I think. I don't mind it as much, but it doesn't make it better. The main thing like makes me like Miles vs. Static is how their powers interact, which is not necessarily fair because I don't know what else could have been done with Deku. His powers don't conveniently line up as well with Miles as Static's do, or I guess they line up too well, where they're almost the same, while with Static, it's two very different power sets that interact in a lot of very interesting ways. Alright, another thing that was brought up is my issues with the ending. I stand by it. I should have brought up that this is not a huge thing because it was likely an unavoidable problem though. Like, obviously, nobody is begging to see Deku collapse in a panic attack of despair and sorrow. It was an unavoidable concern that was always going to be hard to dodge. I should have emphasized that I think the ending's weird, but that was unavoidable. So again, I want to thank the people who are respectful with their criticisms of my review. I recognize it should have been better. I wrote could in the script, but no, it should have been better, and I should have emphasized what I liked more. I'll take the L on how I conveyed it. That said, my opinion's my opinion, that's what it is, and just as I will respect all the people in the comments who are respectful and just wanted to share their opinions, I hope mine's respected too. It's weird that some people call me a contrarian though, as if I didn't spend the last two reviews beforehand and the last two Moro reviews glazing the episodes. It's so weird, like, it's so strange to me that like I make one review that's not glaringly positive and people go, of course he's not positive, all he does is complain. That's why I don't like glaze episodes in a row sometimes. Though I guess, like, I like some of those episodes more than the majority did, so I guess that would still be contrarian to a degree, maybe. Do you think it's a reasonable headcanon to say that Miles actually survived this explosion the way he did in his video game? And that Deku saying, "You are the ultimate," is because he knows Miles survived and that's why he's not bothered? Just like a thought, like, that could be an interesting headcanon. Then Miles comes out like, "Yeah, you didn't say the damn hyphen, bro!"
And this better just be mud.
The jump in quality here is crazy, and I feel a bit crazy myself putting this here. Let's already talk about Ruby vs. Maka, an episode I do really love, aside from one very big blemish. And that blemish wouldn't stop this episode from ranking above a lot of others, but this season's just chock-a-block full of bangers. Ruby vs. Maka is an unfiltered work of love, and has what I'd call one of the best and most dynamic fights of the season. I think just aesthetically, it's probably my favourite of the episodes not done by Moro in the season. And maybe Yugi Ash, hard to say. The all-purple hue does help, of course. I just really like a lot of what this episode has to offer, but I also think this is where I get to the point of the video where I don't have much new to say. With the last 3 episodes, I had things to talk about. I had noticed issues in Kratos vs. Azra that I hadn't prior, I wanted to rephrase some of my issues with Master Chief vs. Doomslayer, and I wanted to actually properly give Spider-Man vs. Suzuki Midoriya the analysis I think it deserved instead of the one I gave it. Ruby vs. Maka and a lot of the other episodes coming up, I just think my original reviews covered all my thoughts on properly. This is a great episode. Maka's analysis has to be one of my favorites of the season. Soul Eater is a series that, among what's used this season, has to be one of the most underappreciated, but this analysis did a phenomenal job really selling what makes it so great, and importantly, the bonds between the characters. I think this is important because there have been a good few episodes involving characters that are basically a 2-for-1, but rarely have they ever properly gone into what makes that bond special to the degree that Maka's analysis does. I guess it helps that Soul Eater's progression narratively and in terms of power directly follows alongside that growth, compared to, say, Venom, to whom the connection between Eddie and the suit is more general and has been long-standing for such a duration that that actual bond itself makes up a smaller part of the story behind the character. That said, coverage of Venom on Death Battle has been shockingly unacceptable. Maka's analysis is a phenomenal correction of this long-standing, yet relatively minor issue in the grand scheme of Death Battle. The love for Soul Eater can be felt, and I'm really happy to say that. That's actually something I think Death Battle did great this season. Some of the lesser known or talked about characters really got to shine in their analyses, and you can feel this energy of wanting to talk about what makes them so great. The fight only shows this particular thing further. In Death Battle, these kind of team-ups have been kind of shaky in the past. I can't comment on how Letha interacts with Spawn, if at all, so he can be ignored. Battlecat is used for a fun little interaction, but nothing else much beyond that. Saba is fun in his episode, but that's about it. Deadpool's other text box personalities have not been in any episodes. Rush was just a power-up for a very brief part of both of Mega Man's episodes. Red and Charizard I think were actually done perfectly, though I can't say if the same applies to Tai and Agumon, because, I mean, just lack of familiarity there. Clank was really well used with Ratchet, but Daxter is almost completely pointless in his episode. He doesn't even get to use his own super form. Bro, he has a whole game to his own, how do you do that? Venom has not only been acting just like Carnage in both of his appearances, but I don't feel like the very interesting and complicated relationship Eddie has with the suit has ever been explored in his analysis. Kurama was used adequately, but I didn't even realize that Zangetsu and Zangetsu existed as individual characters that were integral to Ichigo's story until after Ichigo vs. Yusuke was announced this year. Batman's a fine accompaniment to Terry, but Miguel gets no usage out of Lyra at all in that whole episode. Nabu doesn't do anything but attack Strange once, but from what I know, that's actually fine. Carnage and Ghost Rider, to my knowledge, also fine. Kiryu-chan and Akane were actually handled really well. Skeets is completely absent from Booster Gold's episode. Ragnarok's done quite well, but there's nothing particularly interesting he does. Senketsu and Ryuko's relationship is handled very poorly. Tony's two AIs seem like they work fine if you're going for an MCU thing. I don't even know Asta well enough to say if the book should be talking. Cortana accomplishes nothing whatsoever and is absent from Chi's first episode. And Bruce Banner got his first ever appearance in the 3rd Hulk episode. A very long ramble, but suffice to say, there have not been too many instances where the bonds between these characters have felt palpable. But Maka and Soul banter at the start of their episode. They talk throughout, they discuss strategy, what they're doing next. Soul even saves Maka at one point from the advanced technique of bullets. It's really great, and you know what, I think Ruby's also done great in this fight. It's maybe a little jarring given the last we ever saw of Ruby in her show was full-blown depression mode, so far, but this feels like what RWBY should be normally, and even brings things in that the main show hasn't really had to do in a while, like being a complete weapon nut, and also too naive to realize what she's saying might bother someone. Her announcing her name at the end is a little weird, but otherwise I think most of her lines are great, and she has plenty of fun character moments. Her voice actress also does a fantastic Lindsay Jones impression, but probably not as good as the Micah Solarson impression done for Soul. I think I said before, he sounds more like Dub Soul than the actual Dub Soul, and I stand by that, it's perfect. Marcus is also great, but it's hard to compete in this kind of stack. The fight really is different to a lot of what we've seen. Scythe-on-scythe action is just not very common in media, and it is arguably one of the best choreographed fights of the season. It doesn't feel as much like the random swinging the death battle can feel like. There's a lot more actual scythe hooking motion. There's of course the classic RWBY oops-all spinning style, which is nice to see, and occasionally it dips into a lower frame rate that can actually feel artistic and cool as hell. I love this bit on the roof, and man, I just gotta shout out the camera work here, holy crap. The camera's so dynamic all fight. It's just nice. And I love the fight. It only has a few things I'm not big on, like this silhouette bit feels really stilted, and that's about it. The ending has to be one of the most emotionally powerful. I know it only really feels this way with the context of why the matchup exists and who the episode is for, but as someone who was there and has been waiting for Death Battle to do this for years, to finally do the Monty matchup announced like a decade before it happened, it's just, So the Death Band just to be the first proper death for a RWBY character, and I argue the first good kill in a RWBY Death Battle, followed up by the Scythe landing in front of the moon as the track crescendos into the final "I wish that you could see me now." It just hits. The music I think hits all fight. In particular, there's that great moment where Soul starts playing the track himself. That's really cool. Unfortunately, the thing that brings this episode down in the rankings, I think, is a pretty big one. And considering how good the rest of the season is, one big problem is enough to really hurt how I rank it. I'm quite a fan of Rupert Rose. There was a long span of time where I didn't fucking like her, because she got really one-note and sanctimonious as the show went on, making speeches all the time, and there was a point where every member of Team RWBY just starts blindly following her while having none of their own thoughts and opinions. Like, anyone could question RWBY and her whole team would gang up to support her, but not in a very natural way, in a very, how dare you, nothing she says could ever be wrong way. But none of that's really RWBY's fault, and Volume 9 came along, and I think it really fixed a lot of my problems. I thought her arc in that volume was great, and the episode builds up to it so well. It really goes into the bits as little moments just start piling on, and you might even miss it. It's actually really well done because you might not even really pick up where it's going, just like the characters didn't pick up where it was going. Only to have suddenly her arc entirely discussed in the line of just, she got over it. Now, it's not inaccurate technically, but it's also a very simplistic and derisive way to address it. It's clear something was cut here. RWBY's analysis is only like 5.5 minutes, while Marcus is nearly a full 7 minutes. Where'd the time go? RWBY's analysis just straight up doesn't have a proper conclusion, and it bothers me way more than it should otherwise, because they built up to it so well. They laid down the foundations of the character arc, and then don't bother with it at all. Again, I know Death Battle doesn't need to be an in-depth character study as much as I would personally prefer at least a bit of that, but in this episode's case, not only is there a proper character study in Marcus' analysis, but in RWBY's they have all the setup with no payoff. If you're not going to bother with the main climactic part of the character arc, don't set up the dominoes, then walk out the room. It's so frustrating. I know RWBY's arc isn't the deepest thing outside of that one hole, but like, this is the moment they could have actually sold RWBY as a character. As a premier critic of the show, I do still love the show, and I want people to acknowledge what RWBY does right as a series, and I consider RWBY herself in Volume 9 to be one of those things. I get that some people probably won't care as much just because they don't like or care about RWBY or RWBY, but I do, so I do. And that is a huge blemish to me on the fucking Monty episode, to give his own character the shaft in her analysis. I will say everything after RWBY's analysis is basically perfect. Marcus' analysis is flawless, I have no issues with it. The fight does almost nothing wrong, and I don't think really could be improved in any meaningful ways. And the conclusion, it's not the best written, but it gets the idea across. I do quite like this episode as a complete package. It's easily the best RWBY episode to me, and I don't even think the competition for best Soul episode needs to be mentioned. Though it is very funny to me how both Soul Eater episodes are so much Soul Eater first and the other guy second. What with She Got Over It Rose and pre-1993's Lethal Protector Venom just pretending like his first 5 years of comics was the furthest the character ever got. Still, I am mostly happy with Ruby vs. Maka. If this wasn't such a stacked lineup, might have ended up higher.
What? What's so funny?
Yeah, that's not funny, punk.
It's so funny to me that right after talking about how a character I have a lot of love for in Ruby got shafted, I can talk about how I was pleasantly surprised at how they handled Buffy, who is on the list of my favorite characters Death Battle's ever tackled. Seriously, Buffy is one of my favorite live-action TV series just ever. Up there with, like, Star Trek The Next Generation, Star Trek Deep Space Nine, a few others that aren't Star Trek, like Red Dwarf. And Kamen Rider, baby! Comparably, Blade's analysis is fine. I can't comment as much, just because I don't know him as well. I did notice this time that this line,
Eric Brooks' mother was in labor. Her attending doctor
is clearly two lines cut together. That's not really important. I just don't know how I didn't notice that before. His analysis does a fine job of giving him a storyline to follow and expressing his huge arsenal. I wish they gave proper explanations on stuff like taking down Zerathos. Like, they had to know that a lot of people would have watched Ghost Rider vs. Spawn and assumed something from that, but they don't even go further into it with a corner box. Buffy's was all I could have wanted. They go through quite a lot of her feats and scaling and arsenal, but importantly for me, they also go over her big arc near the end of the series. It's a pretty satisfying way to conclude it, in my opinion, and it does a lot to really elevate the analysis that was already somewhat encumbered by needing to cover a lot of shit. For me, this episode is the best live-action fight in Death Battle history. I know some people would say that's not a high bar, but I do think Red Hood vs. Winter Soldier is mostly a badass fight. In fact, I'd almost say that purely in terms of the direct fighting part, Red Hood vs. Winter Soldier is probably on par, maybe even slightly better than Blade vs. Buffy. It is badass. However, this episode, for one thing, has far better analyses, a conclusion that doesn't shoot itself in the foot, and I think makes usage of the live action better. I know some people don't like the long build up to the fight, which is fair, but for me, this feels way more like a proper short film project, and I like that. Plus, the only guy with more aura than Fiction's Blade this whole season is probably Ben Singer's DJ guy, and a lot of Blade's aura comes from this sequence. It is by far one of, if not the longest build-ups to a fight on Death Battle. Haven't checked myself. Does it beat Goku vs. Superman? But it itself makes for a great fight sequence. I always loved the silly smile and the entirely pointless standing vertical suplex that only exists so that Blade can say that he did it. When the two actually fight, it only stays cool, with Blade's skill and effortless cool factor dominating the battle until Buffy's grit and determination is able to pull through. I do personally feel like the fight doesn't capture what I want with Buffy, but that's a personal thing. See, it's not an inaccurate portrayal necessarily of Buffy, but what I like about her is her scrappiness, her ability to make use of what's around her. She is highly skilled, but when push comes to shove, she's a street brawler. Now, for an animated fight, I understand why that would not necessarily always be possible. You have to draw or model new assets separate from the background that can be moved around and swung about and shit. But in live action, I'm just a little disappointed that outside of how she uses her jacket, Buffy never gave off that resourceful street brawler energy. I mean, she does use one bottle, that's nice, but I feel like the setting was maybe a little bit wasted in the actual fight. All of it for the sake of one Blade reference, and that's cool for sure. In fact, it's cool as hell, and hell is famously cold if you spell it with one L. And I think the toilet set piece is somehow like one of the best ones they've used in live action. You can really feel the tight space and how little it gives the characters to work with. Buffy is fighting for her life like a cornered animal, while Blade is making usage of the walls to keep her down. There's generally some really great stuff here, and I'm glad to see that Ismahawk have progressively seemed to take in criticism of their episodes as it's come along. You'll love to see that. Nightwing vs. Daredevil was criticized as being a bit dull, with no real standout moments, not really any special usage of live action beyond the novelty of pointing and going, "Oh look, it's live action!" So Red Hood vs. Winter Soldier made way better use of the environment, the action was way more fast-paced and exciting, and included more memorable character moments, as well as just feeling like it really needed to be live action. However, it was also seen as having a bit of a lackluster death, And so with Blade vs. Buffy, they kept what worked and improved the death to be far more brutal, cinematic, and exciting. Now I just hope they also take criticism towards this episode if they come back in the future. Say perhaps not having the kill being this like really long obvious build up, or maybe not favoring one character quite as much. As cool as the fight is, it's very much Buffy in the land of Blade with very little Buffy. She's not really acting like Buffy, who should be peppering the most annoying quips for the purpose of pissing Blade off throughout the fight, while also trying to keep her own anxieties at bay. Aside from a final pun and a comment on Blade's swords, I really didn't feel like this is a particularly great showing of what makes Buffy great. But also, the setting, the cinematography, the lighting, it's all very Blade trilogy, and while that makes sense, it does feel like the Buffy side of things got a bit of the shaft. In particular, the music, Neon Ash, is just all Blade, except for a little soft rock riff at the end. I still really like this episode though. There's just enough small things that hold it down for me. Fiction's voice isn't one of them though, I'm not going to hold that much against him. That's just how the guy sounds. I'd rather a Blade that looks and acts like Blade, than a Blade that sounds like Blade but moves like Zangief.
Holy shit!
And here we get to Ghost Rider vs. Spawn, an episode that I think is, to quote Shakespeare, fucking badass in that. At this point we're running on such genuine levels of quality that it's hard to really part why I'm ranking things where they are. This and the next episodes are just being ranked by how I feel in the moment, and most of them could switch around on a whim or are determined just by personal preference for the characters. Ghost Rider vs. Spawn is held back by the fact that I think they look cool and they are cool, but I never cared for Ghost Rider's comic book versions and never read most of his stories, and the Spawn I just can't care. I try to read some of his comics and I just can't get into them. Maybe they get better at points, but I just didn't find interest. The analyses are fine though. Stories are covered, which is cool, progression to power makes sense, the mentioning of other Hellspawn and Riders was pretty fun, and I generally just I enjoyed them. They didn't speak to me, but they were cool, and I guess that's all you need. Which I can say for the fight too. Sadly, it means I don't have much to say about the fight beyond that. It's just really fucking cool. Of course, I give it major points for the sprite work. It is the only sprite episode of the year, and as a certified sprite enjoyer, I love it. They look great. The lighting in particular at the start is gorgeous. In fact, I kind of feel like the start of the fight is where all the creativity went, and the second half is just trying to sell itself on hype moments and aura. But the first chunk of the fight actually has their arsenals and some power. There's some banter between the two and some great visuals. The two fighting on the side of a building with the fire and brimstone raining sideways across the screen. Fucking sick. I love it. I love Spawn calling Johnny a bum. I love the vibes. It's all immaculate. And then Spawn gets sent to hell. The infinite meter is awesome, and I love how he drags Johnny down to his level to continue the battle. And when they're down there, we get two of the coolest fucking transformations in all of Death Battle. Perfect writing. I love the writing. Maybe the best dialogue of the season here. It's all aura and the voice acting is flawless. Admittedly, the final clash is a bit basic, it's all fisticuffs, but I can vibe with the idea that they're just sick of each other and going for the brute force beatdown kill. It's hard not to just sit back and enjoy the fight. I've rewatched it at least a few times for this video and I just don't have moment to take notes down. It's not even because it's so fast that I don't have the time to take notes down, it's just too cool for me to. Intro, perfect. A very 90s brooding self-monologue from Spawn that means nothing but sounds cool, with beautiful hand-drawn elements aside from the kind of weird looking Ghost Rider doing the Akira bike slide. I love that Ghost Rider got to use the flaming shotgun and Spawn brought out what I can only call the Soul Calibur 2 axe. The reference to the Scorpion is shockingly natural and well integrated, and obviously the two punching each other so hard that heaven and hell begin to overtake one another is so cool. I guess I don't know, the chains look weird sometimes, the blood is weird, Spawn regrows his wings off screen which is jarring, the bit with the truck is stupid, and I will admit, it is a little disappointing how little powers go on. I'm fine with the start of the fight, they use the bike, shotgun, axe, there's stuff happening there, the damnation stare's cool, but then in the second half of the fight it is notable that Spawn uses one power in that he stops time, and I guess he uses two, he does shoot Necro Laser, but it is weird, they really emphasize Spawn's variety and they don't get to show it. I think it would have been kind of cool to at least have a little extra bit of time spent to base Spawn trying to use his powers to do anything to Zarathos. I don't know, that would have probably elevated the fight for me. But that's all I have to say negatively. I mean, there's one other thing, okay, The death kind of sucks. I like it in concept, and it starts well, but there's just a few seconds of random penance stare comic panels, including one from Deadpool, which they show in the analysis as an example of non-lethal usage, I think, and no Lobo. You didn't put Lobo in there? What a missed opportunity for what would have been a very minor, brief, and fun reference. But what do I have to say? Vibes are immaculate. It's a very blunt instrument of an episode. There's no finesse, there's no fancy motions, it's all style and brute force. It's a sledgehammer to the hype center of the brain that makes you go, oh yeah? That's pretty cool, wasn't it? I guess the conclusion kind of sucks. I don't know, they did not sell me on that Ghost Rider loss. More importantly, they mentioned like the penance stare and transmutations as options for Spawn to win, as if the analysis doesn't actively go against that, showing that you need to be stronger for the penance stare to work, and fucking Ghost Rider's immune to all physical attacks, and they just don't bring that up. I don't necessarily mind the conclusion being the weakest part of an episode, I can live with that, but I will acknowledge it does suck given that the whole show's titular question is building up to that part of the episode. I still enjoy the episode regardless. I'm eagerly anticipating the next death battle for being a return to sprites. By the time the video actually drops, Ichigo vs Yusuke will have already been out. Oh, and the music bangs too.
A strange fascination with eating his enemies.
Trying to explain why I actually like Wily vs Tom is a bit tough. More than most episodes, I think this is one that's a very love it, hate it, or entirely don't give a shit. There's not likely to be many who go, yeah, I like this a little, because these kinds of death battles just aren't very common. Slapstick-based Looney Tunes-esque comedy based around goofy bullshit instead of action. Even the widely beloved Scooby vs. Courage manages to work in some insane action in that episode, which this one lacks. To go back to the analysis first, Wile E. Coyotes is fine. I don't have very much connection to the character, and so I don't really know what to say about it, but I do think it's quite amusing and they put in more sources than I'm used to, as well as some top-notch editing, which I have not mentioned because that goes for the whole season. The bit about the Toon Force power system I thought was kind of interesting, but it felt very weird to scale Wile E to a machine that some characters use, because he scales to those characters. This is literally the, well, I have a button that launches nukes, does that mean I can punch with the force of a nuke argument? Or that thing of like, well, this world leader can shoot a nuke and I could beat him up, so my nuke level, that like people who don't like power scaling use as a straw man of power scaling, but in this case it's not a straw man, it's just what Death Battle did. I like the through line of Boomstick constantly talking about how close Wile gets to catching the Roadrunner without actually managing it, but there's no real conclusion for that in Looney Tunes, so it does leave the running bit a bit floundering. Oh, and the Chuck Jones part's amusing. Tom's analysis this time around, I have to say, didn't really hit much. Again, I don't know him particularly well, and I don't have any real connection, but aside from the heavenly push joke and the brief stint into Chase, I just don't have much to remember. I guess that I like that, unlike with Wile E, the running bit in the background here of where Tom and Jerry got their names from actually has a proper conclusion that leads to the ending of the analysis. Well, I guess that's needed because the conclusion itself feels like it's just less notable than Wile E's whole thing of he gets up every time to try again. It is amusing that Robin got a title card, whereas Spike Bulldog I don't think even got mentioned. That's like, I feel like that's like if Doctor Doom got another episode where they name-dropped Michael Morbius but never mentioned Mr. Fantastic. Still, I guess it's good enough. There's not much terribly notable, but I'm wondering if that's just because Tom and Jerry's a bit lighter on the variety than Looney Tunes. Both are mostly Chase cartoons, but Wile E's connection to the wider Looney Tunes world means that he has been in and done a lot of different stuff, even if it's still tangentially tied to his origins. But while Tom, it really came across like it was all Chase cartoons, and then this one weird mobile game. That's just clean from the analysis, I'll admit, maybe there's something I don't know. But obviously none of that is going to make or break the episode, it's the fight, as mentioned. It's extremely different, and I'll admit, I think I'm going to shift how I feel about this a lot with time, because it's almost all focused on comedy, and comedy is something to which the longevity of isn't quite set in stone as something like even Ghost Rider vs. Spawn just always being cool. The fight is extremely wacky, as expected, but it does also fall into some odd pitfalls that other episodes don't. For instance, because Wile E has that whole thing of only being harmed by his own shit going on, he only ever takes hits from his own stuff. Even when Tom visibly strikes him, it's using his own signs, or it's in dust clouds where we can't see anything. That naturally makes Tom come off as a bit woefully under-equipped. While Wile E gets to have speed formulas, a plane, a box, a boxing glove, gun, obviously his Looney DNA dissolver, paint for the wall, and a truck, a bomb that I choose to believe is a cheeky little Deadpool vs. Mars reference, and a trebuchet, Tom gets Pipe. Which, I admit, Pipe is about 5 weapons worth, and he cooks a useless invisibility potion and has a sword and hammer he doesn't use. So like, yeah, to try and play in line with the Chuck Jones code, it kind of just leads to Tom having 3 weapons he never swings and also a potion that doesn't do anything, compared to Wily, who gets to use a lot of stuff that backfires and endangers both of them. And the comedy is definitely hit and miss. Like, I find the two being winded or running around funny. I think the plane landing on Tom right after the predictable box falling on Wily is a bit funny, even for how nonsensical it is. And Tom needing to use glasses and take a bit longer than necessary to read 2 words in an acronym is still amusing. But then most of the other jokes, I have to admit, just aren't funny to me anymore, if ever. Like, I appreciate what the episode's going for. I do think the fight is quite solid. I can look at the random stuff happening and say, I like it. But I won't deny it does lose some of its luster with time, and I'm worried that in a few months my next rewatch will probably just leave me not feeling much. I sadly don't think this episode has much longevity, because once all the jokes are gone, it doesn't have much to offer. And I don't think it's as timeless as what it's trying to replicate, which isn't blaming it. That's not a bar I think anyone should have expected it to reach. For now though, I like the episode. I think it's well made. I think it's funny. I like how they tried to work in the rules of the Roadrunner, even if maybe they should have dropped that in favor of giving Tom a reason to be there. And oh right, there's this stupid lives coming out the plane thing. Dumb joke, not funny. It doesn't tank the episode, but this also feels like the only time where Tomcat being Tomcat actually was relevant to the episode. Honestly, you could replace him with any other wacky toon character, honestly, and I think most of it would be the same. Okay, hold on. Maybe I should go in, like, actually give some time to go into what I like, because I feel like I've given a very negative impression of this episode. Start of the fight, unnecessary but very appreciated, surprising amount of story, with the two mutually chasing their prey and then crashing into each other. The war sequence is hilarious. I love how out of nowhere and absurd it is, and it's like the only time Tom uses his own specialized bits of equipment. Aside from the kind of awkward Starship Troopers reference, it's all really ridiculous and quite enjoyable. I like the random explosions from nothing and Tom's goofy little skip over, and the absurdity of Wily putting a nuke on a trebuchet and then deciding to also pull out this pointless other bomb that immediately explodes and launches the house into the sky for later in the fight. I mentioned before how I like that they brought Wily's better speed into things, with him barely managing but still somehow managing at all to catch Tom, even after Tom had already begun running before him and also had the speed boost. Alongside that, the usage of the painted road type gag is a bit played out, but they do something fun with it, where Wily paints a truck in to fuck Tom over and ends up screwing himself over too. And the sidebar of this YouTube bit is quite amusing, and I think the death is funny. Wily only survives it because technically his umbrella wasn't affected by the DNA dissolver. Like, Tom did outsmart him, but he didn't out-bullshit him. I don't mind the blood as well, personally, but I recognize some people don't like it, and I understand. So I do think there is plenty to love here, and even more so if you find the jokes funny, and they continue to be funny on a rewatch. It's a solid slapstick episode, and I would love to see Death Battle try more times and do this better in the future as they build up to the inevitable Bugs Bunny versus Michael J. Mouse.
Get off me.
Shigaraki has the best analysis of the year, and personally I don't think it's all that close. This is now my go-to example of a Death Battle analysis that has sold me on a character I didn't otherwise care much about. I have never finished My Hero Academia. Around season 5 I just kinda lost interest no matter how much Lady Nagant beckons me to come back, and so I was still around the point where Shigaraki was just kind of fine but not really as interesting as Stain or Gentle Criminal. But this analysis has done so much for Shigaraki that it genuinely managed to make me kinda love the character. It's a great example of why going that extra step and putting in a lot of love and care for a character being covered can enhance an episode. It also has some of the best editing all season, and the storyline and how it's portrayed are perfect. The backstory of Shigaraki is given full weight. There's no stupid jokes, there's no pointless, "Hey, that's just like the banana guard from Multiverses" references. It's just a genuine narration of what happened. They perfectly portray decay as the monstrous power it is, lead that into Shigaraki's actual debut in the show, and then his gradual growth as an individual. It's a perfect blend of story, feats, and powers. The melding of what I love most about the potential of Death Battle and versus debating in general. It doesn't just tell you how strong a character is, but talks about how the growth of their strength coincides with the growth of their character. Shigaraki's scaling to All Might and thus Deku and Bakugo's feat isn't just there because it's his biggest feat. Him surpassing All Might is integral to his story. Him catching light beams and surviving the Intercontinental Cock Punch isn't just there because it's cool, it's there because it directly happened as a result of how his story progressed. They don't just talk about Shigaraki's new quirks and other forms because they have to, but because it directly correlates with All For One's plan and leads into the finale of his story. It's what I consider basically a perfect analysis, and I do understand not all characters can really work in this kind of writing. There are plenty of characters who don't progress much in power or don't have that direct leads into their stories and relation back and forth, and then there's comic book characters whom often doing so would lead to their most cosmic stats that don't always get used. Like Thor's big modern storyline is just absent from his modern episode, because if you actually followed it, you would get to the current Thor Force 4. Yeah, Thor Force Thor, and that's a whole other can of worms. But when they have the chance, I love when they take it. I also love that because they started with the backstory of Shigaraki, as makes sense, they shuffle around some stuff that's in different order from how you learn it in the show. In Hiroaka, you learn about Shigaraki being related to Nana Shimura way before you actually see what happened in his past. But because the analysis is told from Shigaraki's perspective instead of Deku's, where the original follows, the Nana reveal is left to the end, so that there's still a reveal. The analysis tells the story of Shigaraki and Hero Academia in a different order from a different perspective, and it works fantastically. The ending is just perfect. I genuinely felt for Shigaraki here. It's written so well, it's delivered so well. One of my favorite analysis segments in general for Death Battle. Unfortunately, this leaves Mahito with shoes too big to fill. Not to say the analysis is bad at all, but it's just it's there. Yeah, I guess it does a good job making him seem like a wanker, and I do like the nihilism through line leading to the, well, suddenly life seems to have more meaning when there's someone who can take it away. I liked it, I thought it was cool. I think it's neat how they cover Mahito's relationship with Yuji, and how it leads to worse things even after Mahito's killed. That said, I just never really felt much. I was like, I guess those powers are kinda neat, I guess he's got something going on. But right after the roller coaster that was Shigaraki's, I feel like Mahito's just didn't live up. Maybe if they swapped them around, I'd be able to recognize Mahito's without the high of Shigaraki carrying over. But I don't know, Mahito's is just acceptable with no particular bells and whistles. And then there's that fight, holy fucking shit. Obviously, just visually fantastic. The animation looks great, but it's also got this wonderful, kinda dirty vibe to it. Yeah, it looks all clean, but it's dark and shadowy. There's a soft blue light that I can only describe as invoking the warm, homely feeling of a public shitter. It makes the subway feel like a dingy nothing burger that belies the sinister evil that has come to find a home in it. The setup is great, Mahito going on this killing spree that he's implied to have done multiple times in the past, with Shigaraki here specifically to find him, but only getting that chance because Danger Sense activated automatically and protected him from an invisible threat that he later has to adjust himself to see. He gets so many points for just starting the fight, texting Darby about this cool League of Legends meme he knows the guy won't respond to. And Mahito's fight with the Nomus is somehow the most dynamic part of the encounter. Just like in terms of fisticuffs, it's the most camera work we see in the episode, and it's a pretty fun place to put it. I think it's really funny that Shigaraki has no intentions of this really being an audition after Mahito badmouthed his buddies. I remember Shigaraki kinda cares about his teammates, right? To a degree. So Mahito talks shit and gets hit. The whole train bit is great. From the way Mahito just doesn't give a shit about it and Shigaraki tries to use it to slam Mahito as hard as he can. The lighting is so beautiful. The way it changes the hue of the fight from blue to a pinky purple gradient that just fits. The whole encounter with absolute defense Shigaraki and distorted body of touching Kitty's Mahito is awesome. With the fight in the train being a set piece, I'd love to see Death Battle used more often. Fighting while within a moving vehicle is always cool. We all know how it feels to be in some kind of public transport, right? It's not always easy, yet not necessarily hard, to stand and walk around in a train or a bus without falling over. So seeing people do fancy moves and shit on one has a relatable context of, damn, that guy's good. And that domain expansion, whew! That's cold as fuck. With all the hands and the animation, oh, it looks so good and fucking sick. That said, I do have some issues with the moment. For one thing, the blonde on Shigaraki's face is clearly overlaid on top of his whole head. You can see that it doesn't move when his head tilts. It's not a big deal at all, it's just something funny. Now, my issue is that, there has to have been some more interesting way to have All For One intervene and stop Mahito's attack. But that Master K at the end goes in! Shigaraki was trying this whole time to look cool and stay in the zone, but now all he has is raw, brutal force and sheer bloody violence. No bullshit, just destroy everything and anything and hope it takes out this annoying little motherfucker. He destroys the domain expansion, destroys the train, the whole subway, the tunnel, and at last the little shit who pissed him off. Mahito's desperation and how much he tries to get away oozes with character. The stark difference between the man who suffered everything and knows how to always get back up and keep fighting to the bitter end against the cursed spirit that has never been pushed the same way. One is a cornered tiger and the other is a shadow of a bear cast by a meager puppy. Mahito tried to lecture Shigaraki to break his spirit, but Shigaraki's response had no real purpose of trying to break Mahito's will to live in the same way. Shigaraki was just speaking from hate and passion, a response from the heart because the empty shell who thought he knew better dared to piss him off. It's such a fantastic ending to the fight that is filled with personality and character. Mahito spent this whole fight joking, laughing, barely bothered. Shigaraki spent part of the fight like that too, but he was getting angrier the whole time, and Mahito poked the bear a little too far. Basically, it's fucking cool and awesome and I like it. I sure wasn't expecting the heavy Japanese grunge track either. It works surprisingly well for the fight, and like, I like it, it works for this. God, I love this episode, and surprisingly so, I had no interest going in. Like, if you were to like, over the top 4 here, it's the only one where I don't care about either character outside of the episode, or even the matchup. Like, it's like, I like Shigaraki now, but I didn't going in, and now I come out, it's like, it's such a good episode. It works fantastically as an example of how Death Battle doesn't need to tailor their episodes specifically for fans. This would not have benefited from throwing in a ton of references and reused lines from official media that only serve to make you sit up in your chair and go, I know that thing! It manages to sell the characters on their own merits, painting a picture of the delightfully nonchalant slaughterer with no backbone and the broken child he's trying to touch that's doing his best to keep a veneer of control. It's a fantastic episode and for me, a surprise hit of the year.
I'm a real pizza, and I'm okay with being eaten.
Yeah, well, Dante vs. Clive is two characters I'm very fond of. One, an all-timer in the halls of Death Battle for me, and the episode's animated by Torian's team, so it was pretty inevitable this was going to rank highly. The only thing it needed to land that I wasn't sure on prior was that analysis, and you know what? Dante's is pretty good. It definitely plays more into how silly Dante is instead of how depressed he is, but that's fine. That is the line where I think maybe you'd be going too far into us in Death Battle for pure character analysis. Not everyone's going to get that Shigaraki treatment, I understand. And as it is a very solid Dante analysis. It's fun, it gets him right, it doesn't pretend he's a pure silly boy, and I like how it actually works his insane scaling into his character. By this point, he had grown so strong that he barely paid attention to the immense scale of the villains, and part of that is because he has nothing left inside to care about anything. It's a good way to make the power scale feel like a naturally integrated part of the story, which matters I think, given how wishy-washy people have been on accepting Devil May Cry at any level. They work Devil May Cry in naturally, which I like, they make a big deal of Virgil and Nero, which is extremely important as far as I'm concerned, and yeah, I mean that's it. It's not a standout analysis to me, it's just a solid, good Death Battle analysis that adequately covers Dante and his story. Clive, meanwhile, is the best analysis Final Fantasy's ever gotten. I mean, the competition isn't stiff. Cloud's analyses have ranged from Season 1 analysis to extremely bad, and Sephiroth was just okay from memory. Clive, I feel, gets probably even more of a look into his character than Dante. I understand that connecting Dante's power to his character isn't quite as blatant as with Clive, though I'd say it's still very much there, but Clive does feel like he has an analysis that better ties in the progression of his power with his story, as the tale goes on and how he grows in his powers. His connection to Joshua and the plot of Ultima all gets wrapped up very well, and the finale is fantastic. Final Fantasy has always had this trend of open-ended stories. Stories where after the villain is beaten and the tale is complete, they just kind of end, leaving you to decide where you think the characters go after the final battle is done. You know, because in the end it's a role-playing series, and you get to look in yourself. You get to decide, after Sephiroth's beaten, what happened to Cloud. This isn't something they even bothered to deal with when addressing Cloud, and not something they could with Sephiroth. I mean, either way, it's all going to end at Advent Children for that one. But I think how they did it here works really well and is pretty fucking cool. And these two analyses being good basically ensure that I love the episode. Unfortunately though, as banging as the animation is, and as gorgeous as it is, it does have enough issues that just stop me from ranking this as my favorite of the season. Like the intro, right? It's a bit weird. Lip syncing isn't up to much, the interaction is fine but oddly paced and delivered. Like, it feels like Clive's line was supposed to end later than it does because he spends just a few seconds walking around before flourishing his sword. There is the lovely Bard line, followed by a weird flash, and then just blatantly not the same scene. Something was absolutely cut here, and it's very off-putting. What's missing? This is the only time Shiva gets used too, and that's unacceptable. In general, Faust is not used at all in the scene. It gets a good showing for personality, and then Dante doesn't shoot any red orbs, which is weird. The Titan stand rush doesn't have much impact. I think the second Dante just disappears, and the next scene is just a "and then it happens" devil trigger pop. Clive Jericho's arm comes out of fucking nowhere. When did that happen? And maybe worst of all, the final clash in their super forms sucks. Clive charges up Big Flaming Doom Ball and Dante charges up Judgment, then Clive throws Ball and it just looks like Dante gets swatted out of the sky, but for some reason Clive also falls. It looks like Clive just nuked himself out of the sky. Even as someone who knows what move Dante is using, despite the analysis not bringing it up, this is conveyed really badly. There should have been a shot between Clive throwing the ball and the big explosion, of Dante at least giving a shout and fire exploding from his body, to get across the idea that he's doing anything. Especially to people who don't know what move Dante is using, I wonder how confusing it was for Clive to suddenly be crashing to the ground from his own attack. You know, I do like Clive versus Azura as a matchup, and this reminds me of something Azura did, huh? Most of these aren't big deals, I should stress, but playing on the same field as the episodes around it makes the small problems a big deal in terms of how I rank the episodes. Episodes like even the one I rank just below do not suffer these issues to the same level. These are small problems that add up over time that do hurt the fight just a bit. But it thankfully has so much going on for it that I can look past them most of the time. All the action looks fantastic. King Cerberus' combo is great, the iconic abilities look stunning, especially Odin and Bahamut's. The entire segment of the fight where it goes all purple naturally falls into my dominion, but it also looks so great with the two having this high-impact fight. They reference the raindrop cut, and as mentioned before, both times I've talked about this episode, in its own review and in my 2025 transformations ranking, I love the way they worked in the brotherly bonds. Dante and Clive love their brothers, but Dante's relationship with Virgil is one of combat and fighting. Two swords constantly banging against one another, and so he references Virgil in the context of how it feels to fight him. Clive and Joshua's relationship is one of mutual care and protecting one another. Two shields orbiting around each other, constantly trying to stay within each other's location to protect one another, and so Clive calls for Joshua to support him in a dire situation. There's some usage of Dante's abilities that isn't game accurate but still cool, like combining two Kalina Ans with Beowulf and Doppelganger. That's just sick. I love the imagery of Dante riding down a building on Cavalier, with Clive having no fucking clue what a motorcycle is, and that's naturally a way to work in response to how wacky Dante's arsenal can get. It works well with the previous comment because, he previously sees the electric guitar, also something not in his world, but he can rationalize that as some kind of bard instrument. But this time, he's just lost. I almost wish he had a reference to the bazooka in some regards, so it got to be like a rule of three bit, oh, you fancy yourself a bard? And he can say something about the bazooka being some kind of you have a handheld cannon, and then follow it up with, what the hell is that? And god, that Ifrit Risen versus Sin Devil Trigger fight is so cool. I was a bit worried how they'd handle the scale issue, but when you think about it, Clive's final Ultimate fight is really not that different from Dante's final Mundus fight in his first game. It's fighting on a universal scale, but only kind of, so yeah, it works for me, but they do kind of just stick to the Bahamut boss fight for scale, which that works too. It's unfortunately a short clash, but it looks gorgeous. I love Ifrit flying through the back, avoiding attacks, and this button mashing prompt as they clash in melee, it's so cool. I think on a visual level, this is head and shoulders above the rest of the season, except maybe the Moro episodes and Ruby vs. Maka. But even there, this is so gorgeously rendered and vibrant. If the faces didn't look so fucked up, I'd say this is among the best of the series. Even then, I'd still argue it's among the best. It never looks bad, and almost always looks gorgeous. It ends on maybe the best animated vaporization death in the show, with us actually seeing in detail as Dante's burned away bit by bit, and a great line from Clive that reminds me, oh yeah, Death Battle can have a respectful line to the loser and not make it stupid. I do think it's a great ending and overall a great fight. Yeah, it has a lot of problems, I can admit, and especially now looking back without the hype of a new episode kind of clouding my judgment. In most ways, I think this is all I could have wanted, and that's what matters to me. I think it's basically a perfect Clive episode, and just a really good, if not perfect, Dante episode. I guess I'm glad Clive got to take center stage in this, given he's far less iconic and popular, but I am slightly let down in some way. Overall, fantastic episode. It directly involves two of my favorite things in Devil May Cry and Final Fantasy, and that helps carry it to particularly high heights for me. But it's just slightly behind 2 episodes.
You're full of shit!
For a while I agonized between whether I liked Ash vs Yugi or Kyle vs Simone more, but while I can acknowledge faults in both, I think Ash vs Yugi's issues are a bit more prominent. Ash's analysis is fantastic. Ash is a character that I feel an older season would have been bullying a bit during the analysis, so it's nice to see a modern one for him instead. He gets full respect and credit. The bonds between his Pokemon are naturally worked in well. It's actually almost surprising how well they fit all the important ones in. This is a real Pokemon trainer analysis, one that isn't just about one Pokemon, but one that goes into the bonds and friends made along the way. Even those not name dropped get to show up visually on screen most of the time. It's great. Much more to say, it's really well done. Yugi's is also great. This was the one I naturally was more interested in and wanted to see done well, and I think it was handled fantastically. Not jumping straight into duel monsters and actually giving us some stuff with him prior to that being introduced was nice, and I appreciate that his bonds with his monsters were given proper respect. All building up to his name reveal, the Zork battle, it's all quite solid. I don't think I have much more to say. As usual, the fight takes center stage here, and it's so close to being everything I want, and only having issues I can describe as purely budgetary. Like, yeah, not all Pokemon or monsters got to show up, and it is unfortunately entirely unavoidable something like this. It manages to include a lot and feel really dense, which I like. I love the start with the sprite work, even if this Pikachu is not fat enough, and I like how the fight itself begins with like a tournament situation where Ash immediately decides to break the rules. Yeah, cheat at your own peril with Yugi, sure. He doesn't seem to give much of a shit, but no, seriously, there's so much going on and that's awesome. Most of the major players you'd want to see get a moment to shine, with the Pokemon especially getting a lot of great shit. Not to say Yugi's monsters don't have their own moments. I mean, Summon Skull and Slifer get to shine, especially Slifer's summoning, like that's just one of the best moments of the fight. And then, as I mentioned, the emphasis on the bonds held between the characters and their monsters is very well handled. Ash goes into battle alongside his monsters because that's the kind of leader he is, someone for the Pokemon to follow into the thick of it. Yugi stands in place for the majority of the fight because he has the utmost faith in his monsters. He doesn't feel the need to dodge or anything, he knows his friends will support him and keep him safe throughout. The immovable friendship versus the unstoppable friendship. There are some simply fucking sick moments, I don't know what to say. Gengar's appearance is cool, Solgaleo's debut is awesome, obviously the Slifer summoning is great, Haraki's fusion happens, and Summon Skull gets to do shit. I'm so happy, I love Summon Skull. And I adore how Atem does so well, but he can't win on his own because he's only half the equation, but he sets the traps early on that Yugi is able to take command of and use in his stead to win the battle. That's so cool, and I love showing the trap and spell cards being huge advantages for Yugi in such a fun way. And while Ash admittedly doesn't get to use many unorthodox strategies, blinding Yugi by using his own bubble shield against him to then hit with Greninja is a very Ash thing to do, which I appreciate. And I think the ending is basically perfect. Ash turned to stone in combat alongside all his friends, except Crocodile, who is unconscious inside of a stone right now. However, looking back with a few months of separation from the new episode hype, I can't deny I'm not sure how I feel about some of what goes on. For one thing, it does feel like the Pokemon get the showcase here over the duel monsters, at least for me personally. Gandora kinda, Karibo kinda, Summon Skull, Slifer, and Harakiri feel like the only duel monsters with their own real dedicated moments. I guess Dark Magician, but he doesn't feel all that notable. Compared to the Pokemon, where it feels like Pikachu, Charizard, Lucario, Solgaleo, Gengar, and Greninja all got moments that were more notable than most of the duel monsters. Like, I say Gandora and Karibo, but they really don't get shining moments, they just have moments that are dedicated to them, I guess. It does unfortunately feel to me like more of a showcase of Ash's Pokemon than Yugi's deck, of which most of it's just there to get its ass beat. And I do feel like there are some weird writing choices. Like, Gengar's clearly brought out to counter Slifer, but then doesn't do that. He takes out some random guys before getting the big suck. Meanwhile, Slifer was summoned to take on Solgaleo, but he completely disappears from the fight after his initial summoning ability before he fuses later. He never interacts with Solgaleo. And Harakiri feels completely unnecessary. Her attack doesn't do shit despite being so supposedly powerful. Same with the Dark Magicians. A lot of this definitely can be excused due to budgetary constraints, because you can already feel them stretching their wallets as far as it can go. It's an unfortunate situation and a result of what had to be done to accommodate. And I can accept it. You have stuff like the Dark Side of Dimensions reference with Atem and Yugi flashing back and forth for the final Destiny draw, and Ash going through all his journey for that one moment before the 10 million bolt thunder throw. And I think it's also really funny that Solgaleo isn't there as a statue, because this was the pose when he got hit, and that's probably going to look really funny and, you know, stuck in the middle of the crowd right now, crushing some poor child to death. I do love this episode. I think it's a great culmination of a legacy that has gone on for a long time, and something I've wanted to see for ages. Oh, and the conclusion is fun. I like how it focuses on how Yugi's main way of playing just works better against Ash's than vice versa. But most importantly, David the PogChamp forgot me again in this little card here, but you fucker, that's just more divorce papers to file. This episode sucks!
I don't care what kind of power you got!
Yeah, okay, so my favorite episode from 2025 is Simone the Digger versus Kyle Rayner, and I also have like nothing to say about it. It's not to say the segment won't be anything, I just feel like I don't have much to say that's not repeating myself. Simone's analysis is great. It covers the story of Gurren Lagann really well, including the common protagonist Fake Out, his death and the fallout, Nia's role in bringing Simone back to his senses, and then leading into the final battle with the Anti-Spiral. Of course, using the movie version of events. It also includes an explanation as to spatial dimensions, one that oddly accuses a point of being a one-dimensional line, a line of being a two-dimensional shape, and then it just skips over the 2D shape proper into a 3D shape to cover up the error, as if, because a point is 0 dimensions, and a line is 1. Kyle Rayner's analysis I don't think is nearly as solid. It's not terrible, but Simone's is a great coverage of Gurren Lagann, while Kyle's is not that. They do a great job setting up Parallax and what led to Kyle, only to jump into the feats and scaling side of things immediately, only barely mention Parallax offhandedly later when the real point is about fridging, and Kyle getting serious, and then they immediately jump to the White Lantern journey, to which they barely really cover any of it outside the last bit with the Pink Lanterns, and then it kind of again just coasts through a few things. I understand, Kyle's powers are a bit more nuanced than a lot of Simone's, which are just big drill, shooty drill, and bullshit about spirals and drills, which I assume is why they're able to fit an explanation on higher dimensions for Simone. Well, Kyle didn't really get that, even though, if we're being honest, DC's kind of one of the first things that people brought in to throw higher dimensions around for versus debating. But also, Kyle's analysis is about 7.5 minutes, while Simone's is about 8. Surely some extra time could have been used to actually talk about anything to do with Kyle, but I think Kyle is simply a victim of the content difference. Simone's equipment, when you get down to it, is really simple enough that they had time to actually go into what happens in his story. Kyle not only had to go into what the Green Lantern ring can do, but also needed to fit time into the other Lantern rings and also White Lantern, lest they fall into the trap of Thanos' analysis where what the Infinity Gauntlet can do is barely addressed more than, oh, it controls this, and then that's it. To be candid though, I don't give a toss about Kyle, and I guess most people probably don't. Most of the matchup's fans and people watching probably really couldn't care less, so from that point of view, the analysis doesn't really suffer that much. I do appreciate it didn't skip directly to White Lantern, if anything. It did actually pay some lip service to Kyle as a Green Lantern, which unfortunately feels like something that's often overlooked, because everywhere you see, he is the one that's notable for being the White Lantern guy. But my lack of interest in Kyle means I'm more forgiving about his analysis being kind of just a respect thread with no interest in his story outside the start and end. Simone's is great, and that naturally means more to me. But yeah, that fight, right? The fight is a beautiful, hand-drawn piece of work that's all hype all the time. And going from one point about Kyle to another, I like that he gets to use constructs of all Lantern colors here. And most of them make sense too. The Pink Lantern, Crystal Shield, and Indigo Lantern balls are just kind of there for the sake of them, but he uses green for most of his constructs, he uses blue as a supporting amp for the green one, he uses orange when taking all the missiles in a way stealing them, red in immediate instinctual retaliation, and yellow in a way that constricts or otherwise tries to suppress Simone physically, something that Simone would have more fear of than most things. I actually really love this whole starting bit. It has a lot of fun stuff. I particularly like Kyle trying to just take Simone's head off and steal away the mech without needing to escalate the fight further that could potentially endanger Simone as far as he knows. Doing so with a golf reference that naturally Simone doesn't understand because he isn't 65 and retired from a career in real sports. Simone also gets to just be a little drillhead for a while, which I think is quite fun, and I just like their rapport. They're very jovial all fight, but it starts here with Simone's little remark about being bad with authority, and Kyle's just like, yeah bro, I got you. I love the dorky little flourishes, like Kyle spinning the glasses for no reason and creating a construct for the video game power meter of the golf swing. Also the closest we've gotten to Monster Hunter on Death Battle so far. In fact, almost everything is from a video game here, except the dragon, which, it feels like there should be more anime stuff, but whatever, it's fun. I will note though, after this point, it's hard to deny the episode starts to just be Gurren Lagann featuring Kyle, and I don't mean that in the sort of Machamp featuring Goro way, I mean Gurren Lagann the show, but Kyle's in it. Again, I don't really care about Kyle, so it's not something I can personally find myself all that bothered by, but I don't know how this would come across to one of the 4 dedicated Kyle Rayner fans out there. For me, holy shit, the Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann transformation, with Simone breaking through the barriers to then transform and emerge from the limitations of infinity, doing a funny little stomp wherein the shadow of his form blocks out the universe, only to be met with failure as Kyle embraces the emotions to their totality and brings forth the construct of the Thought Robot. It's so peak. I love this. How could you not get excited? I love Simone's expressions, I love Kyle's dorky little grin, I love the warm friendliness of the Superman, and hey look, just like the latest Spider-Man vs. Azuka Midoriya, they add the Band-Aid dots to the comic construct, as well as having the onomatopoeia on screen. In theory, the two dropping the song lyrics would be really forced and awkward, but the way they're bouncing off one another makes it really charming. With Kyle being a Gurren Lagann fan, it almost feels like he's living the dream, saying shit to prompt Simone to respond with more lyrics. And you know, Simone's fused with a version of himself who wrote the story. Maybe he wrote those lyrics, and Kyle is just reciting them off, and they know, oh, they're like, ah, buddy, you know what's up, you know what I'm doing. Like, it's actually believable maybe that they would do this. Also, the Red Lantern napalm breath as the Superman heat ray, that's great. Simone smashes through the dumbass wall. Hey look, a DC thing for once. It's actually a pretty fun way for us to get to the life equation power up. I love Kyle doing the Alien X circle motion, that's funny. And this whole segment is, it's so cool. Simone's emotions directly targeted as happens so often to him, and him being empowered by it and calming his phantom. I'm not sure what Kyle was going for here. I guess he wanted to pacify Simone. But yeah, I mean, the Super Tengen-Toppa moment is peak as hell. The Giga Drill break is awesome, even if I wanted Simone to shout Giga Drill break. But honestly, Simone's actor doesn't sell most of the shouts to me, so I guess I don't mind not getting a flat delivery of Giga Drill break. The impact is great, the music skipping for a moment is awkward and distracting, and Infinity being shattered is so cool. And I'm so happy it ends on a grounded fistfight with the two duking it out. Simone gets hit and it turns white like the impact frame of a Gurren Lagann episode. Kyle gets hit and flashed with more dots like a Spider-Verse movie. And it ends on a drill clash with Kyle giving the best line read of the whole episode, building up with the Green Lantern Oath into an awesome delivery for the final Green Lantern's light shout. This might actually be my favorite reciting of the Lantern Oath that I can recall off the top of my head. It's so fucking good. Brandon Acosta cooked. A delivery truly befitting the man who starred in a single episode of Reborn as a Vending Machine I Now Wander the Dungeon. Do I maybe wish they had only one drill clash instead of two? I guess, but both the ones I have are awesome. I guess maybe it'd be better if there was more DC in this fight and one of those could be a DC thing. But like, the first drill clash is all the lantern colors together into a big lantern drill. That's just perfect. The grit your teeth line is really out of place and weird though. To a degree above even Ghost Rider vs. Spawn, this episode is the hype moments and aura. I'm here to see big things happen and for it to be fun, and it is, and that's weird to me. At this point in watching Versus content, this is the last kind of shit I care about. For me, I come to Death Battle to watch them try and tell stories. But I think a big part of why this works for me is that it's Gurren Lagann. Other episodes that are all visuals but no substance exist, but in this case, Simone's substance is the visuals. He's a character that's not just throwing around universes and doing high-scale shit for the sake of it. All those high-end feats and impossible moments directly represent the indomitable spirit of character possessed by him. For Simone, destroying infinity and expanding beyond the universe is not just something badass to make you point and go, whoa, but a direct representation of the kind of character he is. He stands for the strength of the human spirit and the importance of having faith in yourself no matter what or who stands in your way, to always get up and go beyond whatever limits you thought you had, to never settle for good enough, and to break through whatever society says is your endpoint. So when I see him do this stuff, I think familiarity with the character makes it feel like more than just a visual spectacle. I don't just see him doing this because he did it in the show, though that is absolutely the reason. I also see Simone faced with a threat so impossibly powerful beyond what he faced in his own series that he has to speedrun his evolution. Kyle is on a level of power so great it eclipses anything Simone has had to do. He has to push himself beyond his limits, not in terms of power, but in terms of growth. Simone's growth over the course of his home series took years, but here he has to grow and grow faster than he ever has before, going from regular Gurren Lagann to Super Tengen-Toppa over the course of a few minutes. And that's just what Simone does. He stands head and shoulders above his own self and asks, who the hell said I can't reach my pinnacle after only a few minutes of channeling spiral energy? And while that all may just be a bunch of flowery bullshit and me trying to rationalize why I feel how I feel, isn't that what the video is about? That's all any review is, really, or honestly, all a review should be. It's not a critique, it's me reviewing what I viewed, looking at how I felt, what it made me think, and how I was inspired or wasn't, and figuring out the how behind the why behind the feeling. I do think though, for any Kyle Rayner fans out there, how was this episode? It's not lost on me that Kyle himself does get plenty of his own hype moments and gets to be cool, but most of them are just grifting off Simone. Beyond the awesome Superman mech, all he does is copy the Giga Drill break and copy the drill attack, and even the Super mech is just kind of doing the anti-spiral fight, but with a sword and some eye lasers. I really want to know whether this is a good showing for Kyle, because I can't give the same kind of what this means for him speech that I just wasted your time with for Simone. You know, maybe I should stop saying I don't have much to say. I just kind of rambled on for a bit there, huh? The bottom line is, as a fan of Gurren Lagann, Simone the Digger, and its overall message of never letting society force you into a box or accepting your limits can never be broken, this episode does it for me. Is it the objective best of the season? Probably not. That's probably Ash vs Yugi, maybe Mahito vs Shigaraki. But that's not the point of this video now, is it? This is my ranking of every Death Battle episode released in 2025. By now, Ichigo vs Yusuke would have come out starting 2026's run in the first month of the year, February, and I'll have a review of that out already. So go check that out for that. Let me know what you thought below and why actually I'm not allowed to think Chief vs Slayer and Spider-Man vs Izuku Midoriya are just okay, or why you think Tom vs Wily actually kinda sucks. Just remember to be civil. Like my Spider-Man vs Izuku Midoriya review comments, they weren't nearly as bad as I would have expected for how not great that review was. I am spent though. I have plenty of movies and other stuff to watch to get through this year with more content for you all, and obviously, more Death Battle content. So for now, have a good one folks, and I'll see you next time. Oh, jeez, okay, yeah. So that would be the ranking finished. I hope you all enjoyed. I hope that even if you disagree with what I had to say, you can just be civil about it. All your opinions are also completely valid, and feel free to share them down below, you know, nothing wrong with that. I have proper worn myself out doing this. I am burnt out. I am so tired talking about this season. Do I have more content in the future? Yeah, I mean, I guess I will probably do the worst scenes of Death Battle 2024-2025, and I might rank all the music tracks, but I just don't want to talk about this season anymore. I want to move on to something else, or even go back to an older season, you know? The burnout is real though, and I am ready to just do anything else, so I hope it was worth it. I hope you all enjoyed. I hope, you know, maybe I could make you see some things that you might not have noticed about some of these episodes that makes them so good, at least in my eyes, or, you know, maybe I've managed to probably convey that I do think Spider-Man vs. Deku is fine, and not a bad episode. I hope this time I've managed to convey that, but we'll just see. So, thank you everyone for watching, for showing up and having, you know, just adding to the conversation. Yeah, and thank you to everyone scrolling by on Patreon. You're all legends. You have no idea how much it helps. So, if you want to support me on Patreon, link in the description, and you can get access to my Patreon-only Discord, where you can chat with me sometimes when I'm on, and, you know, make me say stupid stuff, like what I will be saying right now, I guess. Yeah, let's get to that. Hi, Nitrox, how are you doing? I'm not sure you really understood what this whole section was for.
God of War! More like... hold on, I haven't read your cookbook yet. I don't know what your deal is.
Wood-fired pizza? How's pizza gonna get a job now? I don't know, but if he was so worried, maybe he shouldn't have grilled cheese sandwich in the kitchen. No, this isn't my end, guys. Stop! Stop it! Stop saying it's my end! It's not! Stop it, guys! It's not my end! It isn't! No, this isn't my end, guys. Stop it! Stop it! Stop saying it's my end. It's not! Stop it, guys. It's not my end. It isn't. Oh, hi, Kraos. I can't wait for Batman vs. Deadpool for next season of Death Battle. Good question. Use my voice to show the coolest way to say an attack. That is so subjective. I don't even know where to begin with that. Coolest way to say an attack? Fucking just whatever way tickles your brain, I guess. Best airplane impression. That was a vacuum cleaner. Yeah, we'll go with that. That's my best vacuum cleaner impression. Yeah, that was that. Wasn't that the funniest thing you ever saw? No? Well, shut up. Yeah, so anyway. Hope. Have a good one, folks. Have a good one, folks. My brain's scrambled. Take care.